Bueno, bienvenido a
Well,
todos. Una
welcome
disculpa ahí
everyone.
por todos los problemas técnicos que
Please
tuvimos.
excuse us for all the
Nada, nos volvemos a
technical
reunir después
problems,
de un
but
par de meses
it's
en los
great to be
cuales el
here
equipo
after a
estuvimos
couple of
trabajando
months.
en
And
avanzar en el
during that
informe.
time, we were
Entonces
advancing in the
pasamos, esperamos
report,
que
and
pudieran
we hope
haberlo
that
visto.
you were able to read it.
Hoy vamos a avanzar un poco más
Today, we're
en
going
este
to talk a
debate,
little
del
bit
cual nos
more
quedó pendiente.
on
Todavía
the
tenemos algunos términos por definir,
certain
dependiendo
terms that terminology
de los
that we have to
idiomas,
define
dependiendo
according
del
to the
idioma en el que va a estar
different
el informe,
languages and
cómo les parece mejor y
what
necesitamos
do
su
you think
ayuda
is
para
best, and
saber
we
cómo se
need
dice
your
cada
help
palabra en su
so that we
región.
can know how each
Y
word
además
is
continuar con el
expressed in
debate
your region.
de las
Also,
cuestiones que se
we
fueron
would like to
sumando a
talk
este
about
informe.
different areas that added
Creo
up
que
to this
Rahab
report,
va a dar un
and
poco más
I
de contexto
believe
de
that
esto.
Rahab is going to
تعود
talk a little bit more about
لا
this.
تعود.
Can you hear us, Rahab?
Okay, Rahab has to continue.
Yeah, I think Rahab, because Rahab has had power issue, they're down with power, so she's had difficulty. Rahab, can you hear us? I think there's issues with I see her and I see her mic is off, but her mic is functioning.
And Dim, can you hear us now? Because you said you can't hear. Can you hear us now? If you do, please unmute. Say something.
For me now, it's okay.
Okay.
I think it's Rahab that's having issues with her sound. So maybe while Rahab tries to sort out a sound, I can start to talk a little bit. Would that help?
Yes, Florence. I think you can go ahead.
Okay.
If she connects, then she'll join you on the way.
Okay. So I'm going to, hoping technology for once this morning works with us. I am going to try to share what we shared with you in terms of the draft. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
great.
Florence.
Fabulous. Thank you. So, as you can see, the conveners have done quite a lot of work now on further doing analysis of the information that you've gathered through both the various meetings we had, discussions, through the matrix, all of the research, the documentation, and started to work from the outline that we discussed last time to bring together through this thematic brief the key issues that this group wants to speak about in terms of transitioning and the recommendation. So there's been quite a bit of work extracting that and starting to unpack some of the key areas. Oh, am I looking at the right thing? I'm not looking at the right thing. Oh, here we go. Did I go? Sorry, I'm kind of looking at the document, and this is just the transition, the document on the transitioning. One of the key aspects that we realized was a question, was an issue, is that looking at all of your contribution and the literature, was that the definition of transitioning, how transitioning is understood, seemed to vary quite significantly between countries and cultures. And in particular, sorry, I'm just going to redo because I think there's a problem with access. Particular in relation to whether we understand transition, how we understand transitioning. So is transitioning something that only happens when you age out of care? Because a lot of the literature, a lot of the understanding or the articulation of transitioning relates to aging out of care. So once you've been in care until a certain age, usually it's 18, in some places it can be later, then transitioning is what happens when you are going to be transitioning to independent living only. But in other ways, in another context, transitioning is understood as something actually which is a constant process, that you are transitioning in some ways the moment you go into alternative care. And that's also what international law in some ways says, because alternative care is meant to be a temporary form of care. And so the concept within that framework is that transitioning from care is not aging out of care or transitioning to independent living. It includes that, but it's not just that. It's also transitioning from being in alternative care to actually going back into family care, or going to an alternative family, more permanent family, for example, through adoption, as well as transitioning to independent living for older young people who are in care. So in other words, it's not just a question of you're transitioning to adulthood and you're transitioning to more independent living, but your transition from alternative care can take many shape and form, and it should take many shape and form. And the reason for that is that the concept of transitioning is not just about becoming an adult and becoming able to live independently in the community, but it's actually leaving care. And leaving care is a process that should take place at any age. You could be 8 and in, for example, residential care. And the institutions, the service, the providers, the government should already be working to be finding a better alternative for you, or more importantly, to reintegrate you into family care or into an alternative family. So the question we had when we looked at this, and of course, depending on how we understand and how we agree transitioning is defined, that has a huge implication for what's in this brief. If we understand transitioning only as a question of transitioning to adulthood and to independent living, then the focus is going to be very much on those transitioning aspects. What do young people, young adults need in order to transition? But if we're looking at transitioning from care as living care, there can be all kinds of ways and all kinds of times and all kinds of needs for a child to be transitioning from alternative care back to family care or back to a more permanent family. So a question to you really was, and we looked at the different definition, and we were feeling that it's going to be really important for this group to agree and define how you believe transitioning. What is the right definition of transition? I mean, not right, because all of these definitions are valid, but what is the most appropriate? How do you want to explain transitioning? And that will have a huge impact, therefore, on the recommendation and what we add to this brief. What are the focus of the recommendation on this brief? So the conveners, with the help of Erin, who unfortunately can't be with us today, started putting together some of the definitions from research, from policy documents, to explain what transitioning, how transitioning is understood in those contexts. And the question to us is, how do you, what does this task force, how do you want transitioning to be defined? What does it include? Is it transitioning in terms of independent living in adulthood, or is it transitioning in terms of living care that could and should take place at any stages of the age of the child, the placement of the child? It's a process that should start. So this is a really important discussion to enable us to kind of continue with this brief, but also to ensure that this brief really reflects your views and your thinking on that. So this is what we wanted to first really have a good discussion on, to understand what you felt was the appropriate definition, or if you had other definition around transitioning from care. I'm going to maybe stop sharing because it's a small group and it's better to see each other. Was the question clear to you?
Yes, it was.
Thank you, Samia. So what do you think? In your context, Anissa cannot hear. I'm not sure why. I think others, you can hear me, yeah? Eric, please.
Yes.
Put your hand up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for the details or understanding of how maybe different people, different contexts define transitioning, and maybe here we can give our opinion or our understanding concerning transitioning. From my how I perceive transitioning, maybe from my background, is coming from care to community-based care. That community-based care can be in two ways: family-based care or independent care. So it's a whether you form all these terms, where does a child go after care? It is still community-based care. So, by that community-based care, I understand family-based care. It can be your relative, it can be a guardian, they can be even somebody who just willing to take you. So that is still a family-based care because you're joining a family, or independent care because you think you grow, you are grown enough to begin your life. However, the understanding of transition depends on the program. There are countries you have deinstitutionalization. That means they have to do transition immediately. So it's not going to be an ongoing process. Then you have other situation where care care, different forms of care, different care institutions are allowed to operate, but there is a process. For example, where I grew, when tea began, at least a child could be transitioned at 3 years old. It was just a temporal solution because maybe a child lost his mother and no solution. So the baby is there, but after 3 years, the baby has to be again transitioned in a family-based, community-based. So in the countries where we have the institutionalization, transition becomes more of a definition that needs to be defined by those who are doing transition. But if it is done on daily basis, at least government has already put policies. Where government has not put policies, you have at least institutions putting that policy. So, but transition, by my own definition, in consideration of all those, it is a process by which a child of a young man, regardless of age, is transitioned from a care to community-based care. That can be either in family-based care or independent life. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. This is very clear and very helpful. Thank you. Elisa, please. Melissa, sorry, I probably mispronounced your name.
Can I say something very quick, Florence? Can we have access to editing the document? So maybe some people can just write down their answers.
Yes, Mike, but I can't do this at the same time as this. So can we do this after the meeting? Sorry, it's just like multitasking.
Yeah, that's fine.
Alyssa, can you hear us, Alyssa? While Alyssa works on, I'm not seeing her mic moving. Maybe Sumaya, if you want to come in, and then we'll get Alyssa again.
Thank you so much, Florence. I think maybe my input would be on, of course, as you read through the concept Rahab shared, I think some of the things are cross-cutting, like they are the same to my understanding of transitioning, but just to take back what the previous speaker said, maybe are we looking at transitioning being a continuous process? Are we looking at transitioning being planned? Are we looking at transitioning being unplanned? Because there are also those particular contexts that we have to look into transitioning. And of course, I think this means different things to a different care option. For example, does it mean the same thing from someone who is coming from an institution to a foster family? Is it the same? Or from an institution to into independent living? Or from foster family to independent living? So I think we need to also navigate those dynamics of how transitioning unfolds in different contexts. However, I really agree with you that, of course, we are not limiting transitioning to young adults. It cuts across children, because we shouldn't limit it to aging out. We could be more inclusive of children and youths, maybe, and I feel transitioning should stem from right when someone enters into an alternative care setting. Those particular processes that are done until someone is settled either in family or into independent living. But if I'm to looking at family where this child fully settles and they're able to thrive in these families, then if you're to look at independent living where this particular young adult is able to start on their own, and like they're able to push on with life, like to that particular stage. So I think my understanding of transitioning would be carefully planned steps undertaken by a trained personnel, and they are unique to each person, and unique to each person and context, in a given alternative care. Um, but it has to be guided, it has to be unique, and it has to be participatory in nature. To some point, it has to be guided by either a policy or a government document, something like that. So I feel my understanding is something like that. I don't want to take a lot of time. I want to give others a chance to also say something. Thank you.
Thank you, Sumaya. That's really helpful, and I think that's what we're and I think you and Eric and other colleagues will is precisely helping us understand or agree the different parameters. And I think what you're saying is really that transitioning is not just aging out, as you said very well, but it is you're transitioning from your situation. You're in care, in alternative care, different forms of alternative care, and you're going to be transitioning back either to your family or to another more permanent family situation, or to independent living if you are of the age to do that. So each of these will have implication for the types of services and the types of approach that are going to be provided. So the recommendation need to be able to recognize that the support, the services, the planning, as you said, the social workers or the workers working on this, the policies are going to need to be addressing this different situation where transitioning is taking place, and not just think of transitioning just as an aging out or living care issue, if I understand what you've said. So thank you, that's really helpful.
Yeah, maybe just to add on, Florence.
Yeah.
Florence, not to stop when someone is leaving, not to stop when someone is leaving, but even after, when until they thrive, until they're able to stand on their own, something like that.
Sorry, say that again, Sumaya. Until they're able to stand on their own.
Okay, I meant transitioning should not be about when someone is leaving care.
Right, okay.
But it should extend to the...
I think your mic has gone off, Sumaya.
I'm done, Florence.
Okay, great. Yeah, sorry, there was a break. So yes, exactly. So that transitioning is not aging out, but it is actually the moving out of alternative care to at different ages and to different situations. Could be independent living, could be moving back to kinship care, for example, could be being adopted. It could be a range of situations, and it of course could be just independent living. Thank you. Alyssa, are you able to speak now? I'm not sure what's happening with Alyssa.
Eugenia said that Alessia was going to answer. We just needed to unmute.
Alicia, are you able to unmute? Here we go.
Salutare tuturor. Din câte știu eu, tranziția este, da, pot fi două feluri. Tranziția de la un serviciu la altul și tranziția de la îngrijire. Dacă vorbim despre tranziția de la îngrijire, este un proces, o etapă prin care trece un copil la viața de adult, este cont propriu și nu depinde de sistemul de protecție.
Yeah, just hello everyone. Just give me a sign if you can hear me. Can you hear me? Okay. So transition from my point of view, as my colleagues also mentioned, is not just having an age, but it's transitioning from one service probably to another one, but also from the service to your family and to community. And also it is very important to mention that this transition to end when this person is ready to be independent.
Yeah. Thank you. And I think you reinforce, if I hear well, you reinforce also what Sumaya was saying, which is that you can be transitioning from one form of alternative care to another form of alternative care. So it's not just transitioning back to family care or into an alternative family or to independent living, but it could be that your transitioning also take place you're in, for example, residential care, and you're transitioning to foster care, for example. Yeah. So that also has implication in terms of the things we say. I see Sumaya agrees. That has a lot of implication as well in terms of the recommendation. This is really helpful because a lot of the literature that we looked at, and a lot of the discussion, we're really focusing purely, they understand transitioning purely at this aging out. And so we wanted to make sure that this brief reflects your definition, your understanding, your views of transitioning. So this is really helpful. Thank you, Alyssa. Michael, I know you had done some thinking on this. I know you're in transit right now, trying to get on your plane, but I know you added, I think, the definition in Colombia. It'd be great to hear your view in terms of the definition in the Colombia context. If you can hear. I'm not sure Michael is able to hear us. No, maybe later. Oh, I'm seeing. I think he's trying to join us.
There's a message in chat.
Yeah, I know. It's in Spanish. Nimu, I see that you said transitioning is for me is dependent to independent after preparing for socialization. So in that sense, you see transitioning as aging out, yeah, or as at least moving to independent living, or are you thinking of independence more broadly?
Can you hear me well? Because it's
yes.
then fine. So for me, like transitioning mean to me like because we used to be in the dependent actually while we are in the childcare institution. So should be we should be the prepare for socialization at least for to read out the name of the bus, to deal with the people, because so many children that who don't have literacy, most of the children sometimes. So at least kind of preparing for everything, and then they are going into the social. And for me, like it's like a dependent independent living style. So they should be living up, because after 18 years we should leave the childcare institution, and we definitely should be have our own place to stay, like it can be the boarding houses or any places. So whatever, wherever we are going, that's for me, that's also transition. But without proper preparing, that can be a issue for the children while they are youth. So for me, like there should be a with the preparation for the socialization, they are leaving to the society. That for me is a transition.
Thank you, Nimu. So can I ask, so you're pointing out that the goal of transitioning is that to have the support and the ability to live independently, and to have the skills and to have the support to be able to be an independent individual, working, living, participating in society generally. Is that the goal of it, or is that the actual, does that limit transitioning to this? In other words, as we discussed before and other colleagues discussed, when you're talking about transitioning at an early age and so on, you can still have the goal to provide that child or that young person with the skills and the ability to become an independent living person. But is that the goal of the transitioning support, or is that transitioning? In other words, transitioning is about that transition to adulthood and to independent living. In other words, again, is it about living care only, or is it about all of the things that need to happen to enable a child, a young person, to grow into a fully independent, confident, skilled individual who's able to function in society? This is where I think one of the real challenge for us in terms of really clarifying how you see this definition. I think Viviana was next.
Michael placed in the
Hola,
chat
¿qué
that he
tal?
wants
Buenos
to
días.
speak but can't right now.
Nada,
Good
creo que
morning.
quería
I
comentar
believe
que
that
los egresados hablamos de
those
transición
caregivers, we talk about
eh,
transition
porque no
because
estamos, o sea, transitamos,
we
estamos en espacios
transition, we
que
are
no
in
son los
different
adecuados
spaces
en
that
la
are
sociedad, o sea, que
not
no
at,
existen en la
that
sociedad
are do not
realmente.
exist in
Entonces, por
society.
ejemplo,
So, for
transitar
example, to transition
de un
from
lugar de
one
institucional
place, from
a
a
pasar a la
residential
realidad,
care, to
a
go out
pasar
to
a la
reality,
sociedad,
to go
es
out to
difícil, o sea,
society.
lamentablemente
It's
estamos
difficult.
en un espacio que
Unfortunately,
no
we
se
are in a space
adecua a la realidad, o
where
sea,
it
no
doesn't,
ves en la sociedad, no ves a
we
una
don't
familia
see in
de 50
society
niños
a
viviendo,
family
o
of
sea, no
50
existe.
children living together,
Entonces,
right? So
tienes que
you
transitar y
have to
adecuarte a lo que
transition
la
and
sociedad está
to
rigiéndose.
see
O
what
sea,
society
entonces,
is about.
mencionamos,
And
yo
we
considero que
mention,
yo
I
menciono la
consider
palabra
that I
transitar
mentioned
o
transition
transicionar
or to transit
a espacios o
to
lugares que se
spaces or
adecúen
places that
a nuestro entendimiento, ¿no?
are
eh,
according to our
transitamos de
understanding.
diferentes
We
maneras
transition
y en
different
diferentes
ways
espacios.
and in different
Transitamos,
spaces.
por ejemplo,
We
en el hecho de
transition, for
simplemente
example,
saber
just to
quién soy en
know
la
who
sociedad,
am
cuál es
I
mi
in
rol en la
society,
sociedad.
what is my role in
Transito también
society.
en mi
I also
manera de
transition in my way
cómo
of
me veo en la
how I
sociedad, qué
see
es lo que tengo
myself
que
in
hacer en la
society,
sociedad para
what I have to
regirme
do
como
to be
un
able
ciudadano,
to
porque
be a
esa es mi
citizen,
responsabilidad
because
que me
that's
toca,
my
pero
responsibility.
lamentablemente como
But
estamos en espacios
unfortunately,
que
since
no
we're in
son los
spaces
reales en la
that are
sociedad,
not
entramos en
real in
conflicto.
society, we go into
Y
conflict.
eso
And
es lo que pedimos,
that
¿no? O
is what
sea,
we ask,
entre
right?
comillas, estás
We
protegiéndome
are, you
porque
are
se vulneraron mis
protecting me,
derechos,
quote,
pero
because
me está
my rights
sacando de
were
la realidad.
vulnerated, but you're
Entonces,
taking me out
enséñame
of reality.
cómo
So
es
teach
que
me
tengo que
how I have
adaptarme o
to
comportarme
adapt
en la
or
sociedad,
behave in
porque eso va a ser
society, because that's going to be
una dificultad extra que me
an
estás poniendo,
extra
aunque entre
difficulty that you're
comillas me estás
placing me,
cuidando,
even
¿no?
though, quote,
Por
you're
eso
taking
hablamos de
care of me. And that's why
transicionar,
we
ya
talk
sea
about
transicionar a la
transition,
vida independiente,
transition to
transicionar
independent
a
life,
una
transition
familia,
to a family,
transicionar a la comunidad,
transition to
transicionar a la
community,
sociedad,
transition
¿no?
to
Porque
society. Because
lamentablemente el sistema de
unfortunately,
protección,
the protection system,
si bien nos da, entre
even
comillas,
though
digo,
it
un
gives us
beneficio,
a
nos
benefit,
acorta
it
lo que es ser
shortens
realmente un sujeto de
to
derecho
really
en una
be
sociedad.
a person of rights in a
Eso nada más quería
society.
comentar.
That's what I wanted to comment.
Thank you, Viviana. This is really interesting, and I think it adds to what others have said in terms of the layers of transitioning, because it sounds as transitioning is beyond the actual place that you're going to. It's beyond the form of care you're going to. It really is more about the approach to enable to empower that child or that young person to be ready to that, to be able to reintegrate or to integrate community, to have those independent living. So it's again, it's another layer. I think if I were to, I've taken notes and we're recording this, but it's about identity. It's about a whole range of things, but it's not limited to the process whereby you're going to be leaving the actual placement that you're in to go to independent living. So it's not limited to a certain age and it's not limited to a certain place. That's correct? Thank you. It's really important because, and I clearly you know this, you're the expert in this, but when we looked at the literature, it was quite hard because some of it in different countries really understand that concept, either as a very physical thing, you're a certain age, you've been provided services, and now you need to leave. And so we're going to, at best, help you move to another location. And what you're saying is transitioning is not about the movement to a location. It's way more than that. It's not about just age. And so I think it's really important that these brief reflects that definition and also reflects, therefore, the implication for recommendation, for services, for support, for approaches to transitioning. So this is really, really helpful. Revocatus, you've got your hand up.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Your voice is very faint.
Mm.
Hey. Revocatus, can you hear? I think your internet connection, we can't hear you, Revocatus, just so you know. Can you, I'm not sure whether you're speaking or not, but we're not hearing you. Can you try again?
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
the connection is very poor, Revocatus. We're not able to hear you. Could you possibly write in the chat? Because we're not hearing your voice. We're not hearing your record. Sorry, if you can write in the chat or maybe troubleshoot your mic. We'll come back to you for sure. Aditya, I think you've made some important points in the chat around the term transition, saying, are we still following the colonial term while using such term? Which is a good question. I don't know. So it'd be good to hear what you think. Is transitioning the right term? Do we have a better term? Do we have a better concept to express all the different elements of what we talked about? Is transitioning, or is, because living care doesn't do it either, does it? Living care is really an event, and it's or is it more than that? I don't know. So I'd be interested to hear what you think about whether transition is a concept that is a colonial concept, or it's a concept that's not appropriate or confusing, and what would be another term for this? And then I see as well, you raise, please do come in.
Yeah, I feel this term we need to reflect in like both like as an insider as well as outsider's perspective.
Yeah.
But as of now, I feel this is kind of like outsider who are claiming they are so-called knowledgeable or professionals. They are using this transition term. If you look at the child's perspective and looking at that, family centric perspective, it should not be used as transition. It can be explored different way. Or if you are using the alternative care and what we can say that other form of family care, and then what can be the suitable terms, and also is it only while leaving the care, or why can't we then use it for the repatriation or restoration in that regard, because that's also transition, right? Or shifting from like childcare home to the family base, that's actually real transition. Then what is the difference we are looking at this leaving the care from institutional care to live in independent? So it's mean like till now we were in the cage, or we were being under control, or what is it? So, and then why we are not talking about to reform the concept of childcare home or childcare institution? Why it is always seen as a control, or uh, because, uh, control the autonomy of the child or the young person? Then that also need to reconsider it. And what is the uh, like quantum, or what is the period of actual transition we can define? That is really important. Is it like particular duration, or is it particular time framework is there, or is it like long term, or till the child get the confidently reintegrated? I would not say the rehabilitated, but at least uh, restarting their socializing life. So how we are defining that on the basis of what and how the period or time framework we are defining. So yeah, we should also critically analyze this, just rather than randomly or following the colonial these terms, and making it within that structure mindset. We should have a discussion and debate on it.
That's really helpful, Aditya, and that's very much what we're hoping this group is going to be doing. And you're right, if transitioning isn't the right term, what is the right term? And not just the term, but the concept behind it. That's really important to do that. I think the point around it's not just leaving care. Yeah, 1 second, Michael. 1 second. So the this question of not just leaving care, I think that's what I'm hearing from everybody so far, that it is not just this moving from a situation in one form of alternative care to out of alternative care at a certain stage when you are aging out of care, but it's broader than that. And it's a process that goes on way before that, and it can get on at any age. But I think your question around, this question of the period, and the question is transitioning the right term, is a really good one. And this question of control. Now, under international law and under national laws, often the question of alternative care is the responsibility of the state, whether it's the state providing it or not. And so the concept is that the child, the young person, is under the protection of the state. When they are transitioning out to independent living, then they actually leave that control or that protection of the state. And that's why often the terminology and the framework is quite narrow and is based on that. But I'd be very interested to hear from others. Do you have a better term than transitioning? Is transitioning the term problematic? And is there a better way, a better terminology for that? As you said, from the perspective of the child or the young person, rather than the professional or the government. I think these are really good points. And that's what we'd like to really get to the bottom of, because it affects the whole of the brief. It affects the recommendation. It affects what you're going to be saying in this brief, how this is framed. So thank you for that, Aditya, and would love to hear suggestion maybe for alternative terminology.
Now, I just have few points and like to continue on this. Like during my literature review of my PhD thesis, I explore there are some example has also, we can explore like positive youth development program. Well, actually, what are the gaps in their earlier life was, missed out. That can be seen as a potential opportunity for that. And it may be that same transition, but it is actually giving a strength of that, program. And it is also decided the time frame instead of just saying the transition. But real meaning, what we need to look at the outcome, what it could be bringing out from the impact of this intervention, that we need to call out rather than just saying a transitional program. So we should see the naming the program in regard to see the impact and the change the effects. So that is what I would suggest.
Thank you, Aditya. That's really helpful.
Excuse me. What I wanted to react to that point. Okay, that's my personal opinion from I believe the term transition fits the context. The reason is the reason why it fits the context is because it's unusual actually for a child, for a young man or a young person to find himself in a care to begin with. So there are two ways these unusual. Is it a mistake? It's an unusual thing, but I'm not going to call it a mistake. But it is always corrected. So the way it is corrected, it's either a child is taken back to the natural habitat he should or she should have been in. So, and to come from care to that natural habitat, it is a transition. It is a transition because the more a child grows in that life, the more a lot is going to happen. Either a child is not going to embrace the family that is going to take care of her or him, and you realize sometimes even some children, when they grow, they even refuse to go back to their biological parents for some reasons. Mm-hmm. So, and again, I cannot call from care to another care a transition. Why? Because I'm telling you, we have it's unusual. It's unusual for a child to find himself in a care to begin with. So it can only, some institution correct this unusual thing by going back to the root, going back to community, or they correct it by a way forward, which is to begin an independent life. And you realize as a children grow in orphanage or in other alternative cares, they embrace the reality that at one point they will have to leave that care. They embrace it. Sometimes you fear, but you realize as you grow, you realize you are not going to be there forever. And now what you know in your mind, the life you're going to begin another life. That beginning another life is what fits the narrative of or the context of transition, because it is another life they're going to begin with. If a child is transitioning from a care to another care, it's not another life. It's because the available care that was there, maybe it has run short of money or some issues, or maybe it has closed. So it's not a way forward to a child or a correction of that unusual thing. So it's a transition when it corrects that unusual thing, or it gives you a way forward. That means you began independent life, because at the end of the day, you're going to marry, you're going to form a family. So since the age take you, or maturity took you when you are old, they help you to catch up where you should be. So this is, I think, from that point of view, transition fits the context of what you are talking about.
Thank you, Eric. That's very helpful. And so one of the key things I'm picking on what you've said is that for you, transitioning is not moving to another form of care. That would be another term. If you were moved from one, for example, residential care to foster care, for example, that would not be transitioning. Transitioning means you actually go back to either living into your family or your extended family, or you go back to living in the community as an independent person, or in supported independent living, for example. But it is not moving from one form of alternative care to another form of alternative care. And also what I picked up from you is you're saying you don't have an issue with the term per se, transitioning. It reflects a change in the situation of that child or young person. But it's not problematic in itself, from what I understand you say. You know, all of what you're saying, it's so important because they are all providing nuance and a better understanding of this concept, but they also have massive implication for the recommendation, as you know, that you're making to states about how they understand, how they support, what they support, and when. So we really want to make sure that we work together on clarifying that, to make sure that the scope of this brief, how it articulates transitioning, how it articulates the steps that must be taken to support it are really reflective of your understanding and experience of that. So thank you. This is really helpful. I see that Revocatus is added as well in the chat. Thank you, Revocatus, for doing that. I'm sorry your mic is not working. The term transition from care generally refers to the process and support system involved when a young person, often in the context of foster care, oops, sorry, I've lost it now, in the context of foster care or residential care, prepares to leave or age out of the formal care system. It encompasses various aspects, such as planning for independent living, accessing education, vocational training, securing housing, and obtaining necessary life skill. Transition from care aims to ensure that young people leaving care are adequately supported to successfully transition into adulthood and independent living. So that's really helpful, Rebecca, and it is in many contexts. That's the definition that we've come across. But I think what we're also discussing here is that this is actually not just what happened in terms of the phase of living care, but it's something that should be happening really throughout the entire processing of caring, right at the start, through the ages, through the child's and the care that the child is provided and so on. The goal should be that the child is able to reintegrate, as Eric called it, the kind of natural environment, the family, the community, and do so with the skills and the ability and the social connection, the social capital, to be able to operate actively, safely, and fully as part of this community. But it's not just that process that you do. It's not just a time bound, which is about moving from alternative care physically when you are 18, whatever the age is. It's a lot more than that. And I think that's where we need to kind of really clarify for this group, what is the agreed definition? How do you agree as a group to frame that? So that's really helpful. But we need to really, we need to come up with a definition, building, of course, on all the work that's already you've done and your peers have done, but with a definition that this group feels very comfortable with, that it really reflects the understanding of the concept, but also the implication for services, for approaches, and for the support that's provided at different stages. Viviana says that she believes that transition is the appropriate term, as it refers to being in one situation and moving to another. The problem is that the transition we have experienced is not adequate. That is why we demand that this transition always be focused on the interests of those in the care system, never violating their rights. That's very helpful. Michael, I think you wanted to, you're able to speak now. Are you there, Michael? Hopefully. Can you hear us, Michael? I think we've lost him again.
He's still on the call.
Yeah, I see him. Okay, hopefully Michael is going to be... Michael, do let us know if you're back in, because we do want to hear from you. And Eric added, and sooner or later this transition will have to occur anyway. Okay. And we have seen situations where young people also choose to leave care. That's a really important one. Choose to leave care by themselves because they want to begin their own lives project. That's a really good point, Eric. That transitioning as well, should that be initiated by the young person as well? And so it's not just a process that's happening and that's being organized by professionals or service providers or the government, but is this also a process that the young person also can or should be able to initiate, and what are the implications to that? Sumaya.
Thank you, Florence. I really appreciate everyone's, contribution towards this, but we also have to appreciate the fact that we are a small group representing thousands of caregivers from different care options. So out, and I think this is really dependent on our very own experiences, because if you've not transitioned yourself, or if somehow you've just been through soft transitioning, or you do not have any lived experience of what transitioning looks like, I think the way you define it is different, and that makes it really a unique thing. So I feel me leaving out the word transitioning, um, I feel it's not right. Maybe we leave it, and maybe we see how best we package it in our own understanding as caregivers. How best, because I mean, as we've seen, many different papers, many different articles are writing transitioning in a different way. But what is our point of view? What is our lens as transitioning? As to us as caregivers or children, because I feel it's this is really a unique experience from depending on an individual, from one individual to another. And to some caregivers, transitioning is more of going from an orphanage or an institution to a foster care or a foster family where they do not even live and they stay there for a long time. So if we are disbanding, transitioning from someone living this one closed alternative care, for example, an institution, to a foster care that is a bit familiar or a bit in community. So I feel we are not fully representing the different sections of caregivers, because yes, I know most of us are coming from institutions, but there are those ones that are through adoption, there are those ones that are through foster care. So I feel we need to be really universally collaborating and having a really uh, tran- uh, integrated definition of what transitioning looks like, that makes meaning to each and every caregiver, and be able to really represent them very well as we are here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sumaya. So that's helpful. So the perspective that that this group needs to be careful that whatever the terminology, the concept it uses is reflecting the reality of children in different forms of care, but also the reality of those who haven't transitioned yet. But I'm hearing by and large that people are saying the word transitioning itself is not an issue, although it is really important to define it properly and to give it the parameters. One thing to just remind ourselves is that the purpose of this brief is primarily to speak to policymakers, governments, agencies that work with governments in terms of precisely the reality of how transitioning should be done, the support, the services, the approaches taken, and so on. So we, to some extent, the brief, and maybe that's also reflect what you're saying, Sumaya, the brief needs to also speak to those stakeholders. They need to understand and they need to see the implication for the way they do things and the change that they need to put into action. So that's another element as well to kind of put into this pot, which is we need to remember that the recommendation for this are aimed as well to policymakers to change the way they understand, they do, they support, they legislate, and they resource transitioning to ensure that it addresses all of the challenge that you've identified and that many individuals in care and who've left care have identified. So that's really, really helpful.
Florence.
Yes, Michael.
Hola, Florence. Es que quiero hablar antes
I
de
want to
coger
talk
mi vuelo. Es que ahora no podía hablar, pero
before
ya
taking
puedo
my
hablar.
flight. I couldn't speak earlier.
No problem.
No, esta discusión es emocionante,
This
digamos que esto
discussion is
deja ver el
important.
espectro tan amplio
It
de lo que
leaves a
significa el
very wide
concepto
spectrum of
transición.
what the
Y
transition concept
transición es un
means.
concepto muy amplio
And
porque
transition
la
concept is very
transición no tiene
wide
que ver
because
solamente con
transition
el
does not have to
proceso
do only with
que
the
viven
process
los niños o jóvenes que han
that
estado
children or
institucionalizados
young
o
people
los que egresamos de
live
protección.
or those who
La
age out.
transición es un proceso que vivimos todos los
Transition is
seres
a
humanos
process that all
dependiendo
human
del
beings
contexto
go
donde
through,
vivimos,
depending on the
bien
context
sea
where we
contexto
live in,
familiar, comunitario,
be it a
institucional,
family,
¿sí?
institutional, money
El
context,
contexto educativo, por ejemplo,
education.
¿sí? La transición
For
es un concepto
example,
muy amplio.
transition is a very
Podemos
wide
vivir una
concept.
transición
We
amorosa, por
can
ejemplo,
live
pero
a
¿cómo
lot of
vivimos esa
transition, for
transición?
example,
¿Qué
but
implica
how do
vivir
we
esa
support that
transición?
and
Los
live that
gobiernos
transition?
entienden la transición
The
que viven
governments
las familias, que
understand
viven los niños, que
transitions
viven los
of the
jóvenes, ¿sí?
families, of the
Tienen los
children, of the young
mecanismos o
people.
herramientas,
They have
programas y
the
plataformas que
mechanisms and
respondan
the tools
a
and
esas
platforms and
transiciones
programs
que
that
viven
answer to
los
those
diferentes grupos
transitions
poblacionales. Creo que
of the
esa es la
different
pregunta que
population
nos debemos
groups.
hacer.
That is
Porque
the question that we must
eh,
make,
aún los gobiernos,
because even the
organizaciones y
governments,
personas no
organizations, and
comprendemos bien
people,
qué
we don't
significa el
understand
concepto
completely
transición y
what
qué
the
implica,
transition concept
¿sí?
means and what
Vivir
it
la
implies
transición.
to live
Entonces,
transition.
si entendemos qué implica vivir una
If we
transición, vamos a saber
understand
qué
that
estrategias
what
implementar para que esa
transition
persona
living means, we will start
que vive en
implementing
acogimiento familiar, que vive en su
things
familia,
for
que
that
vive en un
person
centro de
who
protección,
lives in a
pueda
protection
tener las
center with a
herramientas,
family, with
¿sí?
a foster
Capacidades
care family,
para
will have
poder
the tools
afrontar
and the
la vida
necessary
una vez está
instruments and
afuera,
capacities
una
to
vez
be
va a
able to
entrar a la
face
educación,
life,
¿sí?
once
vez va a
they
entrar a un
leave,
trabajo. Una vez
when they find a job,
va a entrar
when
a
they go
servicios, por ejemplo,
to
comunitarios de
services,
salud,
for
¿sí?
example, health community
Y
services,
eso
for
implica
example. And
preparar,
that
¿sí?
implies
a esa
to prepare
población, bien sea niño,
this
adolescente y joven,
population,
para que él
children,
sepa
adolescents, and
cómo
young people, so
acceder a
that
esas
they know
oportunidades
how
que
to
le ofrece la
access to those
sociedad, ¿sí?
opportunities offered by
Entonces,
society.
lo que se debe hacer es
So what we must do
identificar en
is
cada
to
uno de estos grupos
identify
de interés,
in each
repito,
one of the stakeholder
gobierno,
groups, government,
donantes, porque los donantes deben
donors,
entender qué
because
implica
the
la
donors have
transición y
to
cómo pueden
understand what
aportar para que
transition
esa transición
implies
se viva de
and how
mejor
they
manera,
can
¿sí?
give
Y qué
support
recursos se
for it
necesitan.
to be better
Las
and what
familias,
resources are
¿sí?
needed. The
Eh,
families,
las instituciones, la
the
educación, para que
institutions,
sepan cómo
education, so
acompañar
that they know
a
how
ese
to
individuo en
accompany
ese proceso de
that
transición,
person
¿sí?
in that
Un
transition
ejemplo,
process. For
en
example,
América Latina,
in Latin
los
America,
egresados comprendemos la
the
transición
people who
no es del
age
momento
out
que estamos en el
understand
centro de
transition
protección,
not
sino
from the
desde antes.
moment that we're at the
¿Cómo
center
se
of
vive la
protection,
autonomía
but
progresiva?
before. How
¿Cómo se
do we
acompaña
live
al joven
progressive
durante su proceso
independence? How
una
do
vez
we
estando en el centro de
support the
protección
young people
para
when they're in
entender
the
de
center,
qué
who
contexto vienen, qué
understand
necesidades
from
tienen
what context
y
they
cómo hay
come
que
from, what
acompañarlo
are their
para que una vez
needs,
salga
and
del centro
what
de
support they
protección,
need,
él pueda saber
so that
desde las
he knows
capacidades y habilidades que
from the
fortalecieron
capacities
cómo vincularse,
that
¿sí? a la
how to
sociedad y
link
cómo
to
aprovechar lo
society
que su
and how
contexto le
to take
ofrece.
advantage
Entonces,
of this context.
este es un concepto muy amplio
This is a
que
very
vale
wide
la
concept
pena, digamos,
that it
seguir
is worth
discutiendo, pero
to
en
continue
foros
discussing,
temáticos, webinar, con
but
otros
in
actores.
webinars
Y
with
cuando digo
other
otros actores,
stakeholders
digo
also.
donantes,
And when
estados,
I
organizaciones de
mean
la sociedad
states,
civil,
donors,
con los
civil
mismos
society
jóvenes que están en los
organizations,
diferentes
with the
contextos
young
comunitarios,
people themselves
acogimiento
who are in
familiar,
different
jóvenes
contexts,
institucionalizados, ¿sí? Quizás
institutional
nosotros
young
aquí
people.
en este
Maybe
grupo como
here
líderes
in this group as leaders,
tenemos diferentes nociones de lo que es
we
la
have
transición,
different
pero
notions of
necesitamos
what
escuchar
transition
más
is,
para
but we
poder
need to
tener
listen a
un
lot more
concepto
to be able to have a
global que
concept,
nos permita
a
hablar
global
sobre un
concept
solo lenguaje
that
y una
allows us
narrativa.
to
Entonces,
talk about
me
a
emociona
certain
mucho,
narrative
digamos,
in a
escuchar los
certain
diferentes
language.
puntos de vista de los
So I'm very
compañeros y creo que
excited to hear
eso
about the
aporta
different
a
points of
poder
view of the
alimentar un
colleagues,
poco más este concepto
and this
y el
feeds
cómo
us
debemos
this
acompañar
concept a lot more,
y
and how we
fortalecer la
should
transición
contribute and
independientemente del cuidado,
strengthen
¿sí?
transition
Independientemente del
independently
contexto
of
del cuidado.
care,
Todos vivimos
independently of the
transiciones.
context of care. We all live transitions.
Thank you, Michael. Sorry, I'm finishing writing
Muy
notes. Thank you. This is really helpful. And I think that's precisely, you're right. I mean, this group is not necessarily going to come up with a definition that's either going to be agreed by everybody or that is necessarily going to be final, because just even this discussion for me highlight the fact that, as you said, this needs to be part of a much bigger discussion and a much broader discussion. It will evolve over time, probably, as the thinking around that evolve. But it is critical that this brief really capture where the concept is at this particular time in point, and that it speaks to your realities, it speaks to your experience, your expertise, and that also it speaks to those different stakeholders that have responsibility in terms of providing those services or support. Or so what I'm conscious that we're going to be running out of time, but what would be really helpful is we have started to gather different definitions. We're gathering what you've said here. The conveners are going to go back and pull this together. If you have other definitions that you know of that you like, or that have been adopted in your country, or that you feel reflects your understanding of transitioning, please share them with us in the next 2 weeks, no longer than that, because we need to be able to move forward on this. We're going to try, I say, to put this together with a proposed definition, or propose maybe definitions if we're not able to do one. And then we need to come back to you and to this group and said, okay, we need to come up with a definition that most of you will recognize, but also that will set the framework for then the recommendations, the thinking, the learning that we've done around the services, the laws, the policies, all of the things that we know are needed, but they actually need to be framed within this concept properly. So if that makes sense, and I'm going to hand over to the conveners. Unfortunately, Rahab couldn't be with us because of the power cuts, but she's been also together with Mai and Mercedes leading this process. If we can ask you to kind of provide again, if you know of a definition, or you've seen a definition, or you're using one in your country that you feel is really helpful or partly helpful, share it. And then in the next couple of weeks, I think if the conveners agree, we kind of will work on coming back to you with either a proposal, concept, framework, definition. I suspect it's going to be more than one, and ask you to help us agree on what is the best term, what captures best the different perspective that you've given. So I hope that makes sense. It's really, and I'm glad that Michael, it's so important to this. I agree. I think it's so important, to get this right, because I think when I read different literature as someone who's not care experienced, I get quite confused because I'm hearing very different things about how people are understanding. And that may be because there are different aspects of transitioning. But I think it's really important because it has huge implications for what we recommend and how we recommend. So thank you so much. I'm going to hand over to Mai.
Yeah, thank you, Florence. And you've done a great job facilitating this session, Florence. Thank you. You're amazing. And everyone, thank you for your contribution on this. And as Florence said, please, we are going to give access to the document so everyone can put in their answers. But Florence, I'm thinking as we are talking about transitioning, and transitioning is a broad thing. There are so many ways to transition. There are so many kind of people to transition. But here, I'm thinking our focus really is, if I'm right, is more on transitioning from care, alternative care. And I think our definition should be around that, just to be specific. And also, I think another thing we should put in mind is the age. Like, are we talking about transitioning as adults? I've been listening to colleagues' inputs, and everyone goes to independent living. I think not everyone, but I think two things we really have to focus on is that we are talking about transitioning from alternative care. And I myself, I don't agree that adoption is a form of alternative care. And that is because if you're adopted, you become part of that family. That is your family forever. So, so we can think of maybe foster care. We can think of alternative care, other forms of alternative care, as we are giving the definition on this. And yes, the age, because right now some of us are working, doing some work around reintegration. These kids are being reintegrated back from orphanages, children's homes, back to their families and their communities, and they are like 3 years, 4 years. Are we leaving those out because they are not going to independent living? So I mean, I just want, like, when people are giving us their input, to consider that aspect of age, and also like really for us to focus on transitioning but from care or alternative care.
Thank you, I think most people are, understand that it's transitioning from care, but what is transitioning? What does that mean? And I think that's really helpful. Thank you. I'm just conscious of time because our interpreters need to go. So I just wanted to, if you can close.
Yes, I think Florence, you already mentioned that we'll be coming back. We're giving everyone 2 weeks, and then to give your response, and then we'll come back to you. We'll have a meeting probably next month, and then from there we'll discuss our way forward with our brief. Thank you very much, everyone, and I'm looking forward for your input. All right, I can hear you. All right, bye, everyone.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you, our conveners. Thank you, Margot.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.
Good to see
And
you.
our
Bye, bye.
interpreters.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Nimu.
Bye, Eric.
For the interpreters.
Bye.
And your
Gracias. Thank
patience
you
with
very much.
Bye,
the technology
Eugenia.
today.
She gone already? Bye, Revocatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Margot.
Bye, David.
Thank you, Florence. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye, Alicia. Thanks, Carelia.
Bye. Thank you.
Have you stopped the recording, Margot?
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah.